Hey, so somebody left a comment for me that I thought was interesting. I don't think I've ever really talked about this much on this channel exactly or specifically. The question was, what happens after you ask for a shift in perception, a shift in perspective? I've said on here, when you're stuck in a certain mentality and you just feel like you've done everything you can mentally and probably physically to address an issue that you're having. It's like, and this should always be the first thing you do, but usually, as humans, it's like we just do everything we can without just going straight to the source immediately. If you can do that, it's a superpower. That's something you can learn with practice and habitualize with practice. But basically, when you get to that point, just asking whatever you view as being the power that powers the manifestations of the world, ask it for answers. Ask it for a shift in perception, specifically. So if you're really stuck in a rut with thinking, ask whatever, God, ask your higher self, the universe, whatever you feel comfortable, whatever feels good in here when you think about it. Maybe you feel like you're supposed to think of it as yourself, but really when you think of it as God, it's like you breathe a sigh of relief. Whatever gives you that sigh of relief, that's the right thing. So ask God or whatever, correct my perception. Show me what I'm missing. Let me see this from a different angle. Like, get me out of this rut. Please, pull me out of this vicious cycle that I have mentally that's not getting me anywhere. Just ask for it. It always comes. You might miss it. You might totally miss it and think it was just you. That's the thing about this. If you're not sort of paying attention, you could easily miss how this is all working. When you ask for that, the question that was, what does that look like? How does that actually come to you? And there are a million ways that something can change your perspective. A conversation with a person, something you read in a book, something you see on TV, just an experience that you have. But for me, the way I've gotten used to getting this is, since I'm constantly thinking, I don't know if other people are like this, but if there's a problem, I'm constantly running through it and sort of having an internal conversation. What'll happen is something new pops in there. And it's always like within a couple of hours. And so if you weren't looking for this or you weren't expecting it and then noticing it, you could easily just think that you had a different thought. You know what I mean? You might not attribute it to this process of having asked and received. It's easy. It's really easy to miss this stuff. But so for what that would mean for me is, I have a situation that's causing me some kind of mental disturbance. And I'm going through it over and over, just with my problem-solving mind and my critical, rational thinking mind, like I usually do, because I want to resolve this problem. This problem's causing me a disturbance. And so my response, instead of going straight to shift my perspective, because I'm a lowly peon human, I rely on myself first and go through, how can I solve this problem? How can I look at this problem from my current perspective to relieve this disturbance? This is what I do, and a lot of the time, I just am able to do it for myself. But when I ask for a shift in perspective, what will happen is something that I haven't thought of in the 10,000 run-throughs of all the possible ways to look at this thing will appear in my mind. Or I'll wake up in the morning and I'll just understand what to do. I'll wake up in the morning and that 2 or 3 minutes where I'm sort of like an in-between world, the problem will float up because it's there and the solution will be right there. Maybe it's something that I thought of already, but rejected for some reason. And now I realize that is the right solution, and my objections to using that solution were the problem. My objections were not valid. And I realize that now somehow. How? I don't know. That's why this thing is so important. That's why this request is so important. And you might already be doing this without even phrasing it that way. I think people that are successful already employ a lot of this stuff, maybe calling it something else. But so like, I'll give you a personal example from my life from the last couple of years, a big one. I had an intention in 2020 to completely change my mentality in relation to the way I was viewing myself as a woman and my self-worth having to do with my appearance, to put it very broadly. I just realized these issues are the cause of the vast majority of my negative experience in life. If I had a different mentality about this, I would experience life much more positively. At the time I was in my ideal physical state, so that made it even worse, because I was like, okay, manifesting the external, whatever personal ideal for myself didn't fix this. Struggling with the external never fixes the internal problem. But I think, for most people, if not everybody, you kind of have to get there and realize, okay, this didn't do what I thought it was going to do. And so I made this intention that I would rather, like, basically, okay, I have the external manifestation. I realize now that is not what I need. What I need is the mental to be fixed. Obviously, from where I'm at right now, the idea of not being in my ideal physical state is horrifying. But rationally, I am going to accept that what I need is the mental shift. And if I even, to kind of make this a serious thing, I said, I'm going to be courageous about this. I'm not going to be afraid. Something I think is horrifying. I don't want that to happen. But if it has to, or if I would be happier in a different physical state, if that's what it takes to change this mentality, fine. That's how much I'm committed to changing the mentality. That's how much I'm committed to the external not supporting my internal peace. I'm willing to go that far if need be. Well, thankfully, I didn't, gain like 100 pounds, but I did gain 30 pounds, which was very unpleasant. And I resisted that for 2 years. Didn't matter that I said, hey, if this is what needs to happen, fine. I fought it tooth and nail. I had all kinds of negative emotions about it. And like 2 years into this, I would say, like 2 years after I gained the 30 pounds, after just like so much anger that this had happened and so much self-judgment. I was so angry at myself for having been the person taking the actions to cause that to happen. Doesn't matter if it had to. Doesn't matter that it felt like it was absolutely beyond me and I had no control over it at all, legitimately. I still blamed myself and was super, super, super angry. And it just got to the point where I said, I'm in this miserable mental state about this. Every time I think about it, I get upset and angry, regretful. And I just said, look, I don't know if this is serving some sort of purpose. I don't know if this like mental state is serving some kind of beneficial purpose. But I was just like, higher self, I have reached the end of my ability to deal with this. I'm not getting anywhere. Please, like, show me what I'm missing. I was just like, look, you got to let up on this. Like, God, universe, whatever. Like, okay, it's enough. I need a shift in how I'm looking at this. Or I need, something to let up here. I'm on the brink. Show me what I'm missing. What is it that I'm not seeing? How am I looking at this the wrong way? And that intention, which was very memorable, was the start of it took 2 years to get to that point. Too bad I didn't do it earlier. It was the start of everything. It was just the start of the intention that I had at the beginning of that actually coming to fruition. It has changed nearly entirely at this point. The peace that I have at this point is so far beyond anything I experienced at any point in my life prior to that anyway, but that's not the point. The point is that the way that came about was, I remember this, it was so obvious because this like ask was so intense and intentional and memorable that the thought that came to me a couple of hours later, also, I almost recognized, almost immediately recognized, wow, this isn't a thought I've had before. And the thought I had before was, it was a thought of gratitude to my previous self. I thought, wow, something along the lines, wow, I'm so glad that I did everything I could to get in the best physical state I possibly could a few years ago, because that probably mitigated like everything that just had to happen. Like, what if I had never done that? And then COVID happened, and then my dad got lung cancer, and what if I hadn't done that? And I was dealing with those things while also having the physical burden of, weighing 195 pounds. What if I didn't start this whole thing from 115? What if I started it from 195? And in that moment, this is the important part, because this is all just bullshit. My particular thoughts and issues, it's not the important part. The important part was I had out of nowhere, this thought that gave me an intense feeling of gratitude towards myself, which was quite literally the opposite of what I had been beating myself over the head with for at least a year at that point. All of a sudden, instead of berating myself for, and putting all of the responsibility on myself for the actions I had taken to gain 30 pounds, that's all I'd been doing. And it's just ridiculous. Like the reaction that I had to that was so over the top, which you would expect based on where I started mentally with that intention. I mean, it was such like the antidote. It was just the exact opposite. I had been doing nothing but berating myself, and I said, show me what I'm missing. And boom, there it was, like 2 hours later. Hey, you're beating yourself up when actually you've done everything exactly right here. You did everything you could within your mentality in 2018 to solve this problem. That's the right thing to do. And you did a good job. You manifested the external reality. That's great. And then you recognized there was still a problem, and you made an intention to correct the next thing that was the right thing to do. And hey, you know what? You didn't have to go through an even more painful experience because you had already done the right things. This is what was shown to me. I had this intense sense of gratitude towards myself for everything I had done in 2018 and 2019 in order to manifest that physical form. My attitude had been, I did all this stuff and then I fucked up and fucked it all up. I undid it all. Just like on a whim, like as if my outer actions were like somehow under my control in a way that they weren't. Like that whole experience of gaining that 30 pounds, which I can say now, several years later, I don't know how any of this mental change would have occurred at that lower weight, because at that lower weight, it was just like clinging on to that. It was clinging on to the very thing that I was, had intended to let go of. I mean, I'm not really sure what other way it could have happened, but like gaining that 30 pounds was just like beyond me. And yet it was me doing it. So I just beat myself up so badly for it. And so that was the huge thing. That was the way that particular request for a shift in perspective happened for me in such a memorable way. It was like the thing I was feeling was immediately canceled out by this, more than canceled out, by this sudden ability to see clearly that I had already set myself up to be in the best possible position for all the things that had happened. COVID happened, COVID lockdown happened. My dad got sick. I met my fiance. And then I made this intention and had to go through, this sort of minor physical adjustment to put me outside of my comfort zone so that I could actually then do the mental changing, do the work, which required near constant observation of myself and what I was thinking and applying the intention to it. So, I'm thinking this thing has to be this certain way. And then I realized, does that really Does that jibe with this intention to be free of this sort of mental disorder about this? No, it doesn't. Okay, what's the new thing I'm going to think? Okay, I'm thinking, oh, I have to go do this today. And then my counter to that is, no, I actually don't have to do this today. I have to do this every day is part of the old mentality. I don't have to do this today. I can choose to if I want, but I don't have to do this. My life doesn't depend on it. That kind of changing of thinking in the moment was what then took place over like 2 years after that. I would say that this really sort of reached completion to a large degree in like November of this year. So I don't know, we'll see what comes next, but that's my best example, my biggest example of just a total shift in perspective. When I went from beating myself up and thinking you fucked up to realizing, no, you actually didn't fuck up. You did everything right. And you set the stage for this thing to go down in the least painful, easiest way that it possibly could. That's an example of that. That's an example of how you receive the answer. You receive the response. You receive the, insight or whatever that you need. So that was my personal example. I don't know if that made sense to anybody. If you watched my channel from the beginning, it probably did. But, I'm not a huge fan of just constantly discussing this personal thing about myself. Just because it's like it's personal to me. I'm not sure it even makes sense to anybody else. But it's that same thing. Anytime you ask to be shown something different, the response that I gave to the person who left the comment was, you'll just be like, you'll say, look, I have this problem. I can't figure it out. Show me what I'm missing. Give me a solution, something. Show me what I'm not seeing. And then you'll be like busy washing dishes a couple hours later with your mind just kind of going wherever it goes. And all of a sudden, there's something in there. All of a sudden you think, hey, I've been looking at this thing as a problem, but what if it's actually a part of something bigger that leads me to the thing I want? And like in a way that you can actually understand, oh man, like I don't have a car right now, but what if that's actually a good thing because, mom's driving me to and from work and we've been having a lot of good conversations lately. And, what if that's the purpose of it? You'll just have some sort of insight that relieves that pressure that you're feeling to like mull over this thing over and over again and not ever come to a conclusion. So, just a couple, off the top of my head examples, there will be a shift and you will see things differently. You'll see a solution where you didn't see one before. You'll have a thought that you didn't have before. Whatever the tense feeling is that you have, all of a sudden you'll have a thought about something. You'll think of something in a slightly different way that relieves that thing. And the relief of that tension or whatever is really what you're looking for, because that tension, that's something that's really blinding. It's something that's paralyzing in a lot of ways. So I hope that made any sense. And, I got this whole idea, the whole correct my perception idea from A Course in Miracles 25 years ago. And I didn't do a lot of A Course in Miracles studying or reading back then. I did for a little while, but honestly, it freaked me out. I didn't understand it very well, and I didn't have a lot of life experience at the time, so it just, it seemed different to me. It seemed like it was talking about something very foreign when it wasn't, but the language just didn't really, I couldn't translate the language into something that made sense for me. So I got scared by it and ran away from it, basically, mentally. I just put it on the shelf and didn't look at it again for 20 years. But that one I've used over and over again. Correct my perception, that's from A Course in Miracles. That idea is from A Course in Miracles. The miracle in A Course in Miracles is the shift in perception that you receive by asking. And really, the idea is that you always do that. You do that so much that you live your whole life with your insights and impulses and everything else coming not from you, but from your higher self or God or whatever. It's a practice. And I'm so not good at relying on that, it takes getting to a certain point of discomfort for me before I do that. And that's not advisable. I should do it more, and you should try it at least if you never have, or at least recognize if you're already doing this in some way. You know, you may just get to a point with a problem where you say, you know what, I've thought about this enough. I'm going to put it on a shelf and I know that it will resolve itself. That's another form of this. You know what I mean? It's just sort of the action of handing it over to something else. And that's what kind of relieves that tension and allows you to see clearly. So if you say, I'm just going to shelve this problem and it will work itself out, you know, it will work itself out is basically the same thing as Holy Spirit, give me a clue here. It's the same idea. It's the same feeling. It's the same vibe. Those two things. So I hope that helps somebody, and have a great day.